You can be sitting in a perfectly quiet room, maybe with a cup of coffee in your hand. Your laptop is open. Externally, everything looks, well, completely fine. You are safe. You are comfortable.
Right. On the outside, you've got it all together.
Exactly. But internally, you feel entirely dazed. There is this low-level humming anxiety that simply will not quit. You feel like you're staring into a fog, unable to see a clear path ahead, and sometimes it honestly feels like you are just shouting into a void and nobody is answering.
Yeah, and it is a profoundly modern exhaustion. I mean, people often mistake it for standard burnout, right? They assume they just need like a vacation or maybe a lighter workload.
Oh, totally. Just a long weekend.
Right. But what you are describing is actually the sensation of being physically safe while remaining psychologically entirely unmoored.
And that specific brand of exhaustion is exactly what we are diagnosing in today's deep dive. We are looking at this remarkably insightful, deeply philosophical 2022 essay by a writer named Sui Feng.
It's a fascinating piece.
It really is. And the entire piece hinges on one incredibly pointed question, which is, do you have a pillar of stability? The premise here is that if you are feeling that constant, restless anxiety, the root cause isn't your inbox or, the crazy news cycle.
No, not at all.
Right. The issue is a structural failure in your internal architecture.
Exactly. And to understand the mechanics of this internal architecture, the essay actually begins far outside the realm of modern psychology. It starts with ancient mythology to illustrate a fundamental law of physics and human nature.
Oh, I loved this part.
Yeah, it points us to the classic Chinese epic Journey to the West. Specifically, it looks at a very specific moment involving the Monkey King, Sun Wukong.
Okay, let's unpack this because the imagery here just perfectly illustrates the mechanism we're talking about. So in the story, Sun Wukong travels down to the Dragon King of the East Sea to procure a weapon.
Right, he's looking for something powerful.
Exactly. And he ends up taking this legendary, massive artifact called the Rui Jingu Bang, which, roughly translates to the golden cudgel. It's this magnificent weapon. Yeah. But the moment he actually pulls this cudgel out of the ocean floor, the entire East Sea just goes absolutely crazy.
Total chaos.
Yeah. The water surged into these massive waves. The Dragon Palace violently shakes, and basically environmental chaos just breaks loose.
And the mechanism behind that chaos is, well, it's the entire foundation of the essay's philosophy. I mean, why did the ocean rebel? It wasn't because the ocean was just angry at a theft.
Right, it wasn't a punishment.
Exactly. It was because the golden cudgel wasn't just, a heavy piece of metal resting on the seafloor. It was literally the sea's pillar of stability. It was the singular anchoring force that suppressed the natural turbulence of the water.
Wow.
Yeah. And the moment that specific piece of architecture was removed, the natural state of the sea reverted to violent, unpredictable chaos.
It's the ultimate load-bearing wall. I mean, if you think about playing a game of Jenga, you have this towering wooden structure. You can tap the blocks, you can carefully slide pieces out of the top, and everything seems perfectly fine.
The tower just stands proud.
Right. But there is always that one specific block near the bottom, that load-bearing block, that is secretly holding the tension of the entire structure. If you pull that one block, the whole thing instantly collapses into a pile of splinters.
That's a perfect analogy.
Or think of a physical house. You can repaint the walls, you can rip up the carpet, change the furniture, the house survives. But if a contractor comes in and accidentally removes a structural load-bearing wall, the roof is coming down. You don't realize how crucial that single foundational piece is to the integrity of the whole system until it is, well, gone.
And that architectural reality scales up dramatically. What the essay does next is take that mythological load-bearing block and apply it to the grand scale of human civilization.
Which is such a wild pivot.
It really is, but it works. It asks us to examine entire nations, massive geopolitical systems, through this exact same lens of structural mechanics. Yeah. Like, how do massive groups of humans stave off chaos?
And this is where we need to look purely at the cold math of structural mechanics. The author uses a few very specific political and historical examples to illustrate this concept. And look, I need to be super clear right here. We are absolutely not endorsing these political figures or systems, right? We are not taking any political sides.
Oh, absolutely not. We're just looking at them strictly as case studies in societal architecture.
Right. We are impartially examining the structural math of order versus chaos, just like the author does.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how clearly you can see these mechanics when you look at national longevity. The essay first points to the United States. It asks this purely mechanical question. Why has the U.S. remained a relatively stable nation for over 2 centuries?
Right. What's the structural answer?
Well, the structural answer provided is that the U.S. relies on a very specific systemic pillar of stability. It relies on the deliberate separation of legislative, executive, and judicial powers, combined with the continuous oversight of a free media.
It's a structural pillar that's literally written into the DNA of the country via the Constitution. The essay essentially argues that the Constitution is the golden cudgel.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, without that specific structural load-bearing wall to suppress the turbulent ocean of human ambition and, political factionalism, the U.S. would not exist in its current form. It would have collapsed into the kind of severe systemic turmoil we've seen in nations that lack that specific foundational architecture, like Zimbabwe or Venezuela.
Right, so the system itself is the anchor. But the author then contrasts this institutional approach with a drastically different type of national pillar by looking at China between 1949 and 1976. During this specific period, the nation was facing extreme poverty, immense hardship, and massive internal shifts. Yet, the essay notes that on a macro societal level, the Chinese public remained relatively stable in terms of their collective mental and emotional state.
And the structural reason provided is that the nation relied on a single person serving as the pillar, which was Mao Zedong.
Exactly.
And again, stripping away all historical judgment of the man, the mathematical reality of the societal structure was that his sheer presence was the load-bearing wall. He was the charismatic focal point that kept the societal structure from fracturing into chaos.
It's the stark difference between a system-based pillar and a person-based pillar. And we see the exact same person-based mechanics in ancient history, too. The essay brings up this fascinating historical pattern of ancient royal courts and massive empires.
Oh, that part was wild.
Right. Throughout history, when a powerful emperor died, their inner circle would invariably go to extreme lengths to desperately keep the death a secret from the public and the broader government.
Because the moment the news got out that the emperor was dead, the load-bearing wall was just gone.
Exactly.
The military generals, the rival royals, the wealthy elite, all these disparate interest groups who were previously suppressed by the existence of the emperor would immediately start plotting. Ambition would take over, and chaos would erupt. The living, breathing emperor was the actual functional pillar of stability for that entire era.
Right. And the mechanics of these two approaches are fundamentally opposed, yet they achieve the same temporary result. A systemic pillar, like a constitution, is abstract. It is institutional. It is deliberately designed to outlive any single human being, creating long-term structural integrity.
Whereas a person-based pillar is completely different.
Totally. It relies entirely on the charisma, the continuous presence, and the finite lifespan of a single individual. When the person ends, the stability ends. But in both cases, the function is to hold back the chaotic waters of the East Sea.
Man. So if a system as massive as an empire or an ocean requires a load-bearing wall just to survive, it completely changes how we should look at our own individual burnout. Like, what is the mental equivalent of a constitution?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. The author pivots from these massive macro-level case studies straight into the micro, the deeply personal internal architecture. And here's where it gets really interesting. They introduce the concept of the pillar of the heart or the pillar of the mind.
Yeah, this is where the philosophy really demands introspection. The essay is essentially challenging the listener to audit their own mind. Like, what is the golden cudgel holding back the chaos in your own internal ecosystem?
And it lists a few common archetypes, right?
It does. For many, the pillar is deeply spiritual. Devout Christians utilize Jesus Christ as their load-bearing wall. Buddhists anchor their internal world to Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Their entire moral compass, their existential worldview, and their fundamental sense of safety in a seemingly random universe are structurally anchored to those spiritual figures.
But, I mean, the vast majority of people do not use spiritual figures as their primary anchor, right? We move into the worldly and the material. Money is a massive one.
Huge.
The essay astutely notes that for people who use wealth as their pillar, their internal ocean remains incredibly calm as long as their bank accounts are full. They feel a deep structural security.
Well, sure, everything feels fine.
But the absolute second that account dips or, an investment fails, their emotional and mental state immediately fractures into chaos.
Yeah.
And the same goes for power or status. People who need a specific job title or a certain level of influence over others to feel grounded.
Yeah, and then there is the one that is likely the most common in modern society, the professional pillar. using your career, your daily output, or your professional trajectory as your core anchor.
Oh, I think so many people do this.
Absolutely. And to understand why this is so common, we have to look at the psychological mechanism of what a pillar actually does for the human brain. The essay provides a beautiful articulation of this. With a pillar of stability, the mind remains steady because, as the author states, effort has direction and striving has a future.
Effort has direction. I
Yeah.
love that. Every mundane task you do suddenly has an existential framework.
Exactly. When you have a functioning pillar, it filters out the noise of existence. Conversely, the essay points out that without that pillar, the mind becomes deeply disoriented. Effort lacks a goal, and progress has no direction.
Oh,
A pillar answers the fundamental human question of why am I doing this? If your career is your pillar, you don't question why you're answering emails at 8:00 p.m. Every meeting, every spreadsheet feels meaningful because it serves the structural integrity of your internal house.
wait, hold on. I have to push back here on behalf of anyone listening who just realized they are absolutely using their job or their financial portfolio as their primary anchor.
I'm sure a lot of people just had that realization.
Right, because having money in the bank literally prevents chaos in my life. It pays the mortgage, it buys groceries. And having a career I care about gives me a reason to get up in the morning. How is anchoring to financial security or professional success a bad thing? It seems completely rational.
It does seem rational, but if we connect this to the deeper mechanism of the essay's core argument, it isn't that having a career or desiring financial security is inherently bad. I mean, they are incredibly vital tools for navigating the physical reality of the world.
Okay, so then what's the issue?
The psychological danger, the critical structural flaw, arises when you elevate a tool to the status of a pillar.
Explain that distinction. What is the actual difference between a tool and a pillar in the context of human psychology?
Okay, think of a massive ship crossing the ocean. Your
Yeah.
career, your skills, your wealth, those are the ship's engine and the steering wheel. They are phenomenal tools for moving you forward, for navigating the waters, for getting you to a destination.
Right.
But a pillar is the gyroscope situated deep in the hull of the ship. The gyroscope's only job is to keep the entire vessel from capsizing when a massive storm hits.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. If you mistake the steering wheel for the gyroscope, you might feel totally in control while the waters are calm, but the moment a hurricane hits, a steering wheel cannot prevent you from flipping over. The essay is issuing a stark warning about the catastrophic psychological collapse that happens when you choose a fragile, finite tool and demand that it act as your immortal load-bearing wall.
Because tools break.
Yeah.
And the author actually walks us through these devastating if-and scenarios to prove just how fragile our chosen anchors often are. It's a brutal look at cognitive dissonance.
It really is.
It's the fact that we as intelligent people constantly build our existential foundations on things we fundamentally know are temporary.
Let's look at the emotional one first. The essay points out that if you see your spouse as your pillar of stability, if your entire internal equilibrium relies on their continuous presence, then you are building your house on shifting sands. Yeah, and the psychological burden this places on both people is immense. Human beings are inherently dynamic. We evolve, we change our minds, we get sick, and inevitably, we pass away.
Right.
If your foundational stability relies on another human remaining perfectly static and ever present, any change in them will shake you to your absolute core. You have outsourced your gyroscope to a biological entity that you cannot control.
And the exact same fragility applies to the professional pillar we were just talking about. The essay states that if you see your profession as your pillar, losing your job won't just feel like a temporary financial setback. It will feel like the sky is falling.
Because you didn't just lose a paycheck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You lost the cognitive framework that justified your existence. If you anchor to a specific industry, and suddenly AI comes along and renders that industry obsolete, your world is, as the author puts it, shrouded in darkness. You experience a total existential vacuum because the block that was holding up your entire Jenga tower just got yanked out by a tech company in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And the logic maps perfectly onto wealth, too. The essay argues that if wealth is your pillar, losing your money doesn't merely reduce your purchasing power, it leaves you completely unmoored from reality.
You just lose your entire orientation.
Right. You lose your orientation in the universe. It is a total structural collapse of the ego and the self.
The author also brings up the danger of anchoring to teachers or mentors, right? If you make a specific teacher or thought leader your pillar, and they suddenly suffer a massive scandal and fall from grace, your entire moral worldview is shaken. You question everything you ever learned from them because the pillar wasn't the knowledge itself. The pillar was the infallible image of the person.
Yeah, it's so dangerous. And returning to the geopolitical macro level, we can view this same fragility from the perspective of an individual citizen.
Oh, this is a big one.
Very big. If you utilize your country's president or any specific political leader as your personal pillar of stability, you are in a highly precarious position. If they lose an election or if they fall from power, your own personal life suddenly feels chaotic and directionless.
Because your anchor is gone.
Exactly. You have essentially handed the remote control of your central nervous system over to an external political machine that doesn't even know you exist.
Which is an incredibly terrifying way to live, especially considering how rapidly the world shifts. It forces us to confront a really uncomfortable reality about our own choices.
Well, this raises an important question, which is arguably the most critical structural question of the entire text.
What's that?
If our natural inclination is to anchor to these fragile, temporary things like our jobs, our bank accounts, our leaders, how do we actually evaluate the quality of a pillar before we attach the entire weight of our psychological well-being to it?
The author gives us a formula for this, and it is incredibly simple, and it's entirely brutal. The reliability of your pillar of stability is directly tied to its lifespan, period. That is the math.
The lifespan dictates the structural integrity.
The longer lasting your chosen pillar is, the better and more reliable it is. The shorter its lifespan, the more unreliable and dangerous it is to your mental health.
Makes perfect sense.
If the thing you are using as your load-bearing wall can die, if it can go bankrupt, if it can be voted out of office, if it can decide it wants a divorce, if it can be rendered obsolete by a software update, wait, let me rephrase. If it can do any of those things, then it has a finite, highly unpredictable lifespan. And therefore, it is an unreliable pillar for your mind.
It is a profoundly sobering realization because it highlights a massive blind spot in modern culture.
How so?
Society actively incentivizes us to choose our pillars based on immediate comfort and external validation. We are told from a young age that climbing the corporate ladder, accumulating massive wealth, or finding the perfect romantic partner are the ultimate existential goals.
Right. So we naturally make them our pillars.
Exactly. But society never warns us about the structural integrity of those goals over a timeline of 40, 50, or 80 years. We measure our success by the height of the building we are constructing, completely ignoring the fact that we are building it on wooden stilts.
It holds up perfectly fine today, while the weather is nice and the economy is decent. But what happens when the storm comes? What happens when the sea starts churning? If your golden cudgel is actually just made of cheap, rotting wood, it is going to snap under the pressure.
Which brings us full circle to the psychological symptoms we diagnosed at the very beginning of this deep dive. That dazed, unsettled, deeply anxious feeling that plagues so many people today.
Yeah.
The essay strongly suggests that this anxiety is not a malfunction. It is a highly functioning early warning system. It is your subconscious mind recognizing that the pillar you have chosen, whether it's your current job title, your stock portfolio, or your social status, has a finite lifespan. Your brain knows the foundation is structurally unsound, even if your conscious ego hasn't admitted it yet.
So what does this all mean for you? We started this deep dive talking about burnout. That feeling of shouting into a void. Xu Feng has essentially handed us a blueprint and challenged us to go down into the basement and look at what is actually holding up our internal roofs.
It's an audit.
Yes, I want you, the listener, to audit your own life right now. Look at the architecture of your daily routine. What is the actual load-bearing wall? Is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, the thing that gives your effort direction, something that could legally or biologically disappear tomorrow?
That's the scariest question to ask yourself.
It really is, because if it is, this essay is a direct warning that you are uniquely vulnerable to catastrophic chaos.
And in an era characterized by severe information overload, rapid technological disruption, and constant unrelenting societal change, this structural analysis is more vital than ever.
Absolutely.
The external world will always be the churning, chaotic East Sea. You cannot control the ocean. You can only control your anchor. Choosing an enduring, long-lasting pillar is the ultimate shortcut to maintaining mental clarity and emotional peace amidst all the noise. It is the only mathematical way to ensure that your striving always has a future.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought. A logical conclusion that the text points us toward, leaving the final puzzle piece in your hands. Think about that core formula. The longer the lifespan, the more reliable the pillar.
Right.
Well, human beings eventually pass away. Jobs disappear, massive companies go bankrupt, global currencies fluctuate and collapse. Even those powerful nations and empires eventually fall into the dustbin of history. If absolutely everything tangible in the physical world has an expiration date, does that mean the only truly reliable pillar of stability must be something entirely abstract?
Something completely immune to the physical world.
Exactly,
Yeah.
something fundamentally intangible. What would a truly immortal load-bearing wall look like in your own life?
That is the exact structural question every individual must answer for themselves if they want to survive the storm.
Because until you find that immortal foundation, you're just another block in the Jenga tower, desperately hoping nobody pulls the wrong piece. Take a long, hard look at your architecture and ask yourself, what is keeping your ocean calm?